In hopes that the technology gets sorted out, my name is Kate Hammer. Some of you who were in Neil's session already know that first name. That was a wonderful talk from an institutional perspective about fostering creativity. I feel very honored to follow it because I think what I'm going to give you is maybe more of a guerrilla perspective. I'm also really grateful that Neil mentioned Luke Johnson on muddling through. Indy and I had a laugh. It's the definition of the entrepreneurial life, and it's certainly the definition of today's talk. I was on holiday last week when Christine drafted me in to prepare this. I don't know if these slides will work. What animation is there is really naff, so apologies for that. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Can we do the slideshow? Thanks. So here's hoping this works. This is a little birth. What I'm going to share with you today is something that is just being invented. And it's being invented in order to help people like me, who may also be people like you, to structure imagination. This is very much a test drive. And the way that I'm going to share it with you today is to share with you things I've learned from Steve Jobs, because if anything, in 2012, it is impossible, I think, not to interact with his extraordinary legacy, but also from a little girl, Ruby, who is my daughter's age. Now, a quick bit about me. Kiln is an innovation catalyst company that I co-founded with Indy Miyogi and a Second City veteran, Greg Fraley. There's some little brochures lingering about Kiln. Kiln is the third new project that I've incubated since 2010. When I came through passport control on my way home from a holiday, and the home office person read entrepreneur on the landing card, she said, "What kind of entrepreneur are you?" And I said, "I'm a tired one." 3 in 3 years is too many. That New Yorker cartoon is probably hard to read. The chap is saying empathy. Yeah, I can see that would be useful. That's up there because I trained as an actor, and the thing that I've carried forward from that training is empathy. The power of the imagination to bridge the distance from who you know you are to the reality that someone else has. And the thing on the bottom, deconstruction is easy, semiotics is hard. I am the last semiotics graduate from the one university in the US that used to have a semiotics program. Semiotics is the study of not just the exchange of meaning and culture, but its creation. So I've been at this game of making meaning and sense-making for over 20 years. When I was at university, I had a conversation with the dean, and he was trying to advise me about where I might study outside the US. And he finally threw up his hands in despair and said, "You know what your problem is? You have no heroes." That was so hard for me to hear because he was so right. And I have spent more than 2 decades trying to understand why I didn't grow up with heroes and what a hero might be. And strangely enough, I discovered that it is that search for what heroes are that has made me obsessed with the question, how does change happen? And I think the link is this. Change is created by forces coming together, and it's also created by people choosing. And we can frame the choices of some people as heroes. And if we keep that person who is undergoing change or creating change in our focus, in our sights, we have the beginning of a story. So I think that not having heroes, wanting to understand what it was like to have heroes, getting interested in change is what ultimately led me to be interested in stories. And I now am in the luxurious position of earning my living not simply as an innovation catalyst, but as what I call a commercial storyteller. Now, do you guys know the Johari window? Yeah. Okay. When people want to create change, when they're trying to spark innovation, it seems to me that there are 4 areas that they can probe. They can look into the known knowns, and there, where innovation happens is around technology. It's getting the pieces to work together better so that the experience is more elegant or more dynamic. When we move to the known unknowns, somebody knows, only we don't, our innovation is beginning from research. Where the messy stuff starts happening is below the line. When we're looking at unknown knowns, somebody knows, but we don't know who, we start digging. We start working on uncovering the unspoken, whether it's within our organization or in our ecosystem. So there's a lot of talk about open innovation. And open innovation is about smearing the boundary between us and them because they might know. And I think Greer's story is a great example of the blurring boundary between a business school and a bunch of other professional practices that can enrich learning. Finally, the area of unknown unknowns. That's when we're really in the dark. And that's the place that we have to use our imagination. Now, Neil gave us the opportunity to use our imaginations today. He invited us to build a story one by one, and no one could know where that story was going. How many of us felt uncomfortable with that experience of not knowing? I know I did. Not knowing and wanting to discover, wanting to make something out of nothing is something that actors do. It's also something that innovators do. But it's really hard to do without some kind of framework, some kind of tool. It seems to me, my hunch is that story, as a form, which exists across cultures, can guide us in how to structure imagination. But the tricky thing about story is it's really a knack. You either are someone who intuitively and habitually tells stories and knows how to engage your audience and bring them along with you, or you don't. So how do we make story available as a tool and not simply as a talent? That's the problem that I've put my mind to recently. I'd like to begin with first of all, the thing about stories, particularly in the way in which they're used in change, is that they come in two forms. Stories are either rear view mirrors. They're the way that we capture change that has happened and retell it in order to cascade it or propagate it or reinforce it. So stories are used to capture lessons that are effectively from the past. The harder, bolder stories, but the stories that all innovators engage with, are the stories that are windows on possible futures. Stories that don't begin once upon a time, but instead begin with what if. Are you guys involved in innovation? Is what if a question that you ask yourselves day in and day out? Would anybody very briefly be willing to share a what if that's on their mind right now? Do you have one? Anybody got a project that's on the boil? Great.
I'm designing a training program for some leaders in my firm, and they don't ever say what if, and I'm trying to make them ask what if. The reports from last year's program of a different kind was we didn't have enough war stories, so that rings true. There wasn't enough war stories or sharing of experiences. That's what they want to do. That's where they're quite comfortable learning from stories. Yeah.
Great. So, sorry, your name?
Joe.
So if Joe's project works, managers in her business will be better able to say what if more often. And they may well use stories of other what ifs to help them build that courage. Thank you very much, Joe. I'd like to begin by thinking just very briefly about Apple. I mean, dissertations are being written about what Apple is about. I'd like to hone in on a very specific moment in Apple's history when Jobs was returning as CEO. 1997. He'd been gone quite some time. He had made a success elsewhere, but he'd come back to a company that desperately needed to re-articulate itself. And I'm going to ask you guys, please, to spend a minute listening to Steve Jobs talk to an internal audience, and then watch an advertisement. The talk is him introducing the advertisement to his people.
isn't making boxes for people to get their jobs done, although we do that well. We do that better than almost anybody in some cases. But Apple's about something more than that. Apple, at the core, its core value is that we believe that people with passion can change the world for the better. That's what we believe. And we've had the opportunity to work with people like that. We've had an opportunity to work with people like you, with software developers, with customers who have done it in some big and some small ways. And we believe that in this world, people can change it for the better. And that those people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that actually do.
So it's not about boxes, although we do that better than anyone else. It's about the people who want to change the world. And the way that Apple articulated this was in a campaign that ran for some 7 years.
Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them, but the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. And while some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
One of the wonderful moments that Jobs has with his audience before he shares that commercial for the first time, he says, now some of these people have obviously died, but some are still living, and I'd like to think the living ones would use an Apple. Think about that, and think about, somebody mentioned in Neil's session, celebrity. We're very used to endorsements being bought. It's quite a different thing to imagine that your heroes use what you make. That the people who use what you make are heroes, it seems to me, is the thing that Steve Jobs is sharing with his company. And that vision catapulted Apple to the place that it now occupies. So the heroes that Jobs is talking about are nonconformists and rebels, and the value that Apple is seeking to create is that people are unleashed so that their passion, not Apple's passion, their passion can change the world. That was my little moral of the Apple story. That's a very different view than advertising often gives us of products, where the product is the hero. 1957 advert for headache medicine, an agency that set the tone for Madison Avenue. The product is the hero. Clairol, does she or doesn't she? The product is the hero for covering her gray. Never mind that we think the problem is a small problem. If you think the gray hair is a problem, this is your savior. That's the view that advertising has often given us about products and their relationship with consumers. And it's not just the 1950s. It's a trend that is still going on. This advert by Nike, 2010, voted into the Clio Hall of Fame, appeared in September 2001, a very difficult time for the retail sector, especially in North America. And it broke all records. And the hero of the tag game in this anonymous city is the shoes. It's not the person, not the runner. It's the shoes. There's a part of our business thinking that has us convinced that our products are our heroes. And if we're the creators, the manufacturers, the sellers of those products, we move ourselves into the hero place. But in my mind, that's not the way to create a home run. We need to rethink what we understand in our business thinking about who is the hero. And we have to make room for ordinary people, people who may well be like us. This is Rudy Lambert. Rudy was a classmate of my daughter's. This photograph was taken when Rudy was 5 and a half. I'd like to share with you now, this is another of the projects that I've incubated since 2010. 2/3 of a movie that Ruby's parents made, a year after Ruby's health changed dramatically. And I don't feel that I've got enough of your time to show you the whole movie. And I want to share with you that the movie was created to share with an online community of people who had grown and grown and grown in support of Ruby and her family. And that this movie was made for people who were part of that community, not strangers like you. So I beg Ruby's pardon and I beg your pardon. And I ask you please to think, as you watch the movie, if you feel uncomfortable about the proximity that the movie is pulling you to, please think about some of the areas in your life where a what if, a transformation is something that you would like to create. The movie is called Anniversary. blueprints were determined to optimize Ruby's recovery. And what we saw in the world was two things. The hunch, which became substantiated, that Ruby's recovery prospects would be greater if she could go to the USA, because their approach to neurorehabilitation in private establishments is research-driven, very ambitious. And as it happened, Ruby's mother had a Fulbright fellowship waiting for her. When Ruby's heart stopped beating, in April, the family had already planned to move in September to the University of Pennsylvania, which happens to share a campus with a children's hospital that has a world-class research program in, guess what, hypoxia. The study of what happens when the brain is deprived of oxygen and how children might recover. So the challenge in our little village, there are supporters of this effort in Northampton Square, so you're in our neighborhood. The challenge was how to make that happen. What if? We're out of time?
We're
Okay.
running out of time, so if you can just...
So we created an online platform, and we imagined what a new normal would look like. And the heroes I discovered as this movement grew were not Ruby. Ruby is the hero of the recovery story. The hero of the innovation are all the people who have offered their time and energy to do outlandish things in order to spread Ruby's story and raise funds. And Ruby herself has seen the benefit of that. You can't connect the dots when you're looking forward. You have to have another tool. And so, putting those two stories together, I have started working with a thing called Storyform. I don't know if you guys know Alexander Osterwalder's work on business model generation. This is a tool that you would use before you come to this work. Who are you? What do you know about the world? What might you offer? Offer not in the sense of improv, something more formalized, a product, a service, an initiative. Who is the hero of that initiative? What kind of value could be co-created if heroes grab your offer? And if that value is substantial enough, how might the world change? It seems to me that this tool, this way of thinking, and a canvas to work together on, is a way of teams, of innovators, of people with what-ifs, having some structure to the imagining of the future they would like to bring into being. And having already put this into practice with the third of the startups, a tool to build trust. So right now, it's called Storyforms. I'm inviting groups to work with me using Storyform. I hope to develop guidance notes and push that out so that there is a book and a curriculum like Osterwalder's, and also looking for an institutional partner. Thank you very much, and I'm sorry about the time.